We are live at the MSS Southeast, our first foray to make friends from all the way from Louisiana to the Carolinas and Florida and a lot more other places. And on our panel, we're very pleased to welcome Chellasamy Jamburajan, CEO at AlertOps, Tim Fournet, the Cratemaster, Rewst, Ben Chappell, CEO of Apona.ai, Teddy Guzek, CEO at Shield Cyber, and Nathan Taylor, CTO MachineLOGIC. Lovely to have you all on. How have you enjoyed the day so far?
Doing well.
It's been great. Yeah.
Been great. Yeah.
Never been better, my brother. Never been better.
Well, nice to have you on, and I've actually promoted our final panelist. Please do accept the promotion, and then you can join. We're talking the MSS of the future, constituent parts, the tech that goes into it, strategic considerations. I guess, Nathan, maybe because, Nathan, you've been to a lot of these events. Let's start with you. Why are we still interested in the future shape of the MSS? Surely the future shape is that it just provides more security and it's stronger, it's better. I mean, where can a panel like this actually go?
Yeah, I think the idea that an MSS or an MSSP is a static concept is never been true, right? We're an industry that's constantly evolving, whether that's in our roots back in the early 2000s when a lot of us were deploying small business servers and first figuring out Exchange and mobile devices, and that's where a lot of our industry got their roots, deploying firewalls and servers to small business. And then we've evolved over time to embrace the cloud, and that brought a lot of change. And now that we're all on the front lines of cybersecurity, and that's a world that changes on a daily basis. I mean, we're just, the threats are dramatic, and they're evolving quicker than many of us can keep up with. And so I think as you see a lot of MSPs with often aging ownership and leadership, a lot of consolidation happening, it's just a season where whether people want to or not, it's going to look very different in 2 or 3 years. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us to talk about the pros and cons of the trends we see in our industry.
I like that. Well, thanks very much. And it also makes my job easier because, of course, if you'd have said, no, nothing's changing, then that would have been bad. But let's spin it a little bit. Teddy, let's come to you. We can talk about what we want, but how do we know what the end customer wants? What is the end customer interested from this MSS service anyway?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of what they want and what they need. So, some of the end customers are looking for their service providers to tell them what they need, right? From a regulatory perspective, from a governance perspective, what are the things that need to be in place from there? But then also, I think the biggest thing is listening, right? As a product company, that's one thing that's been a big thing for us is working with our service providers. Same thing with the service providers working with their end customers, is keeping your ears open, understanding what's going to help them achieve their goals. And I think that's really the key to that relationship for a service provider to an end client, is actually understanding what those end goals are and how can you help them get to that part, right? So moving past just the idea of doing IT for them, but rather how are you helping them achieve their business goals as a whole?
Yeah, and you make a good point, because it's not just about, well, hello, what would you like? Oh, I'd like this. It is about being a trusted advisor. And there's, they might say, I want this, and then you come to them with a solution and they say, oh yeah, well, don't have the money for it. So it is much more about being hands-on, isn't it? Ben, let me come to you. What does this then mean for our discussion? Because we want to do customer research. We want to ensure that it's a daisy chain, isn't it? That the solutions provider wants to know what the MSS, MSP is wanting, and they are supposed to know what the end customer wants in turn. And there is an element of, teaching them. But how do we do that market research, I suppose? Focus groups with everyone in the room, like an event like this? I don't know. What do you think?
It's communication, right? I think it's a lot of this. I think it's a lot of coming together in a meetings of the minds and sharing what we know. When I look at this space over the last 15 years that I've been involved in the managed security practices, it's a pendulum. We've gone from very specific, unique solutions that we bring to market, to the all-in-one, to now we're bringing back the pendulum swinging back into highly specialized, unique organizations that can bring solutions that others can't, right? And so for the smaller guys, it's bringing in a knowledge base that becomes trusted. You know, it's how do we earn that trust? It's not just that we know more, but it's that we're ready to share it. And I think that's what we're seeing right now in the MSS space.
Yeah, that's good, because then if we share it, I mean, the Southeast, quote unquote, is such a large area. It's not like you're in a microcosm where there's no work. You can cooperate, you can collaborate. But Tim, let me come to you. I guess with this, what is proving essential from a governance layer for the MSSP of the future? What is becoming the go-to essential feature beyond managed SOC, managed SIM, and the three-letter soups?
Yeah, I think it's just being able to scale properly. So that's what everybody's struggling with right now is scaling. So you need to have your processes in place and be able to execute those processes consistently across your base, at the same time solving business problems, and showing that value, showing how you can solve your customers' problems that they're having that may not just be a typical tech question, right? You know, how do you make their business run more smoothly and show your value while you're doing it?
And Tim I mean, I don't know really, but is scaling actually difficult? Surely, if you've turned it into a service and it's cyclical, is it that difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There are just so many manual processes that everybody has to go through, right? So, it could be something as simple as add moves, joins within an organization. Those things are all security adjacent, or if not security focused things that need to be done. And scaling those typically means that you're, using manpower to do so. And it's just difficult to keep on top of things like that.
Okay, very good.
Scaling is, just on that topic, scaling is a double-edged sword, right? There's organizationally and personnel, and there's process orientation there, and then there's the tool set, right? So when you look at some of these tool sets, it's different. That's a completely different conversation. Yeah. Starting at enterprise level, start there. Easier to scale down than it is to scale up. Same with the organization side.
Absolutely.
I like it. Well, I just got a message from Chella, our fellow panelist. He's had to focus on a customer issue that just immediately came up, but he was there. You saw him, right? You know he's real. Nathan, I guess we're still looking at this from a governance perspective, and I know you got a session later on talking about insurance. What governance layer? I think this one is actually designed for you in a way. What governance layer do you think the MSSP is going to have to bundle? Insurance? I know that's your sort of sweet spot, but what do you think?
I mean, I think governance in general is one of the big areas everybody in the industry needs to grow. And there's a reason it was added to the cybersecurity framework recently with the revision. Is I think a lot of technology providers we think very technology first. Hey, I built the tools, I installed the application, I configured it properly. We think very to me, one of the reasons I got into technology is I get to build. It's like building with Legos, man. Building a small network is like building with Legos. It's just growing up and I get paid for it. It was fun, and then you throw governance in there, and that's not fun. That's details. That's repeatability. That's documentation and evidence, and looking for the gaps and that sort of stuff. And so I think that's our biggest area of growth across our industry is doing a better job of governance. And I think it's still being defined what that looks like for our industry. I mean, this is the entire conversation we're having with, filling out due diligence questionnaires, security questionnaires, cybersecurity insurance questionnaires. What does governance look like? How do I prove that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? I don't know if there's a clear and simple answer. I think these security frameworks gaining momentum, cybersecurity framework, CIS Top 18, are a big part of that, where we're starting to agree on what what some common best practices and standards should be and ways to kind of approach the challenge. But what does that look like? Is there going to become an industry standard way of demonstrating your compliance, your governance? And I mean, even in a small subset of this, CMMC with the federal, subcontractors, defense subcontractors, it's been a major battle to try to define what does governance look like in that environment. So I think it's as Ben said, this is where we have these conversations. We're all going to have to wrestle with this together to figure out, what that looks like long term.
Well said. Philip, you're on mute.
He's either on mute or his mic stopped working.
Yeah.
I can lip read. You guys want me?
Well, does anybody else have any input on that? I mean, that's a great question we started with. Like, how are we going to get to governance? How are we going to get to this next stage of maturity, across our industry?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it all just comes down to what does it take to stay in business, right? So insurance is that baseline pretty much for everybody. And then what does it take to serve your customers? What requirements do they have? And what do you need to follow? Is it worth following those requirements to keep that customer, to obtain that customer?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, insurance is definitely the thing that's driving a lot of this, which is a little, you want to say unfortunate. At the same time, there's got to be a driver for everything, whether it's regulatory or insurance, in order for people to spend more money and understand what they actually should be doing. But the whole carrot and stick thing, not a lot of carrots you can give out for having good cybersecurity. You can just not get breached, right? But I think, you look at MFA, and I know, Nathan, I know you're talking more on cyber later, but one of the things that we've talked to a lot of insurance companies about is just that rollout in MFA has actually reversed the direction of those premiums lately, which is huge. And I think the service providers have done a great job of adapting to that and rolling that out and creating that, making that become a hot topic and a big issue. I think what's going to be really important is, going through all those things and understanding what are those other items around governance that need to be put in place that gives you the full holistic idea from a cyber perspective, preventative, reactive, processes, procedures, things like that. And it sounds ideal. It's going to be a tough uplift, but I think the service providers that really handle those things and allow that process of their customers being, SOC 2, GDPR, whatever they need to do, the ones that make that an easy process are going to really stand out and shine in the long run.
Yeah, ease for their customers. The one throat to choke. The one thing they want is ease. But we heard earlier today, oh no, these are obligations. They're going to be too onerous, too hard, especially for the single person shop. Now, I don't think we have many single person shops at these events, but Ben, what do you think about the notion that it's just going to be too hard for new entrants or too hard for the smaller shops?
That's what highlights the success of a service provider. I mean, that is the value that they bring to the table, is being able to do that and being able to be that specialized arm and the defender for those who cannot defend themselves. I think, you mentioned the point earlier about we grew up playing with Legos, Nathan, and we wanted to put these things together to see what we could build. And sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's the dream of, when I was a kid, I think every boy at some point wants to be a cowboy or a police officer or something, right? To rescue that damsel in distress. And there's still an opportunity out there. And that's what led many of us into cybersecurity, right? It's that little bit of fulfillment that comes on the other end, just to know that we're doing the right thing. Mark my words, there will always be a market for the security provider, because there will be guys that are too small that the big guys don't have time for.
But what if the provider is too small? Because you're right. Obviously, that's why the MSS and the MSP plus S is successful. But what if the requirements, like, I don't know, like they suddenly say, public liability at $1 billion? Like what? Like, could we reach a stage where, like, the really small shops have a real problem?
Sure. Sure. And they'll have to swizzle. like we all do, right? You reswizzle, you refocus, and then you start targeting a certain area that doesn't require $1 billion of coverage. Most of those smaller guys we see locking up, let's just say segmented state contracts, things like that, if they want to get into that space. And then they can start to build some of that authority power and level up into that. Also through partnerships. I've seen some of these providers go through in partnerships, and you start to see, we're seeing the rise in the power of some of these community groups and these programs, like some of our friends over at the 20, that are able to collaborate and build different aspects from provisions that are in there. So yeah, it's going to be a problem. It always has been. And as soon as the government can make money on it, it's going to continue to be a problem. But fortunately, we get 4 years to prepare every season.
That's
every
handy.
4 years it changes again too, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what NIST 2.0 just came out, right? And I think it's got a little bit more color around the insurance arm. It's got more for our sake, it's highlighting source code security, and it's going to continue to evolve, right? And at the end, that ends up to sell.
Yeah, I was wondering, we're talking about it as a bad thing that there's a barrier to entry in the cybersecurity. There's more regulation over cutting hair than there is about managing the servers of $1 billion company. You got to go pass a test to cut my hair and get paid for it legally. I don't have to do anything to go log into the server for one of my $1 billion customers. And so I think, as much as we would love to get ahead of the regulation and self-regulate, self-standardize, I think it's going to be hard to make that happen. And I think at some point, having a little bit more onus and barrier to entry where, there'll still be ways for individuals to contribute, whether that is subcontractors or, working in specific roles or partnering with people. I think the partnering is going to be a big piece of, hey, I'm going to do this piece, but I have a partner that pulls in that piece. I think it's going to come down to scoping, but that's not a bad thing. This idea that I can be a 5-person MSP and I can cover every bit of technology need you have, even as a small business, I think is just, it's not how things work now. Things are moving too fast. It's too complex. And I think you're gonna have to be bigger to have the resources across multiple teams, or you're gonna partner, or you're gonna limit your scope. It's gonna be one of those three.
All right, so let me throw that partnership question to Tim, because Tim, do you think then that the obvious answer is to say all these break fix and pure play MSPs, which may not exist, but let's call them pure play MSPs, you now are the local partner of an enterprise MSSP. Is that an easy fix?
It can be. We're seeing community play a really big role in the success of every MSP. So being a member of a community, no matter what that is, like the 20, or even something like MSP Geek, or even MSP Reddit, right? So making use of the resources that are out there. You don't have to be a large MSP to be operationally mature. It helps, but you can get there as a small MSP, especially as you guys mentioned, like limiting your scope, knowing what you're good at, where you play, and where you don't. And I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for every size player to work together and do what they're good at.
Yeah, and
on that, I think
I
think it's important just to kind of understand where you fit and have the maturity and understanding of that this is our size business, this is our niche, and not trying to boil the ocean, right? And be able to help with everything and every size customer and every industry, because ultimately that's going to be way too much information. You're going to be able to handle more breadth of scope if you're working with a more narrow industry, right? Less industries, you're going to have less regulations, you're going to have to understand and follow, and things like, and vice versa. So I don't know, that's just another piece that I would add to that is that just understanding, finding your right partners, they're going to help you get to that point. And if it's security, then finding the right security service provider that can actually, tie in and become an arm to that managed service provider. So
absolutely.
For the service providers out there too, I think of it this way sometimes. How many of us live in a house? Like I do. Most of the people I know live in a house, right? Would it be sensible to say I'm not going to live in a house because the build was managed by a general contractor, right? he didn't build every aspect. He had a group of individuals who had very specific practices and specialties. Together, it built a home which you now love, right? I think it's okay to celebrate the transparency behind that. To say,
yeah, it should be preferred.
But these are the partnerships that I have bring into this, and this is the end result and the solution.
Love it. And in the audience, Chris says part of a community, which is good.
Reach it, Chris.
And I guess then if we accept that, or if the customer base accept that that's how the secret sauce is made, then we should be more comfortable with discussing their needs and being a trusted advisor. And you must all have seen it. Conferences like IT Nation, they didn't focus on security 5 years ago. They didn't. They focused on resilience, backup, disaster recovery, but they didn't say security. And I know there's my whole shtick and my whole anyway. But I like the fact that that's come together. So when my last question, which I've got written down, the future of this MSS, and we've been talking mergers, acquisitions, and all that. But if we look at the bundling of new and exciting SaaS solutions, because there's lots that promise bundle my SaaS and you will be, okay? Should we build or buy the MSS of the future? Maybe Nathan, start with you and I'll work my way around.
I think both options are valid. They just both comes with their own set of pros and cons. So I don't think I want to pick a side. I think there's some really interesting vendors out there that are throwing together some really compelling solutions where they're combining a lot of security solutions and even starting to loop in insurance providers and other layers. And for a lot of smaller MSPs, I think it's really a compelling play, and I think it should be looked at because I think it does spread that expertise, spread that risk, gives you access to things you couldn't build quickly. That being said, I also think for many companies, they've got a lot of value they're adding by being able to build it themselves, and I think you can be more unique in the way you provide it. So I think there's pros and cons and variables and layers that have to be weighed on that front.
And I think that gives us an extra third way, not build and buy, but like build, buy, and kind of rent in that, if you build it yourself internally, you got a massive DevOps team, fantastic for you. You buy it, you buy it, but then maybe Teddy, you could say, well, here's my service, yet I now have so many licenses from a SaaS provider. And that's kind of halfway, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so. So going off of what Nathan said, right? There are probably very few service providers that have a full-on development team that can pull together their own solutions. And right, I count on a couple of hands there to know what that would look like. But I think the key is, or at least for me, is similar to what Ben said before, was about the service providers and making sure they know where they are, where they line up in the stack. It's the same thing for vendors. So like, just because a vendor says it checks all of these boxes, that does all of these things, that's like, oh, this is the cyber insurance platform that's going to give you everything. It's not going to necessarily line up with the right amount of security, right? Because it's going that breadth and depth thing. So I think it's important to focus on vendors that are very niche in what they do, and putting it back on the vendors to make sure they integrate well with all of your products in your stack. And I think vendors do a good job of that too. I know that's one thing we're very focused on is making sure that there's as little friction as possible with the other products and tools and vendors that we partner with as well, just to make sure that it is a seamless integration. And while one of the solutions may not be the front runner in terms of where all the stuff is happening, it's definitely the engine behind some of the data and information that's being pulled together. So I just think that's important to know and to understand before you're going to purchase a product or something like that, is where does this tie into our entire stack? And it's not just going to be a siloed product that's going to end up causing its own engineer or something like that from your team. So
that's a good point, because one of the questions that some MSSPs have is, I'll bundle it, but does it now mean I need a new director of integrating your solution?
Yep. ...
What about for you, Ben? Do you think that the future is built, bought, or kind of rented, somewhere in between?
I'm a builder. You know, I joke about it, guys, but I'm telling you, like, I have a screwdriver that I stir my coffee with every morning.
Oh,
Just to remind me that I'm always building. But like on a serious note, when I look at and that's true, but when I look at the whole idea between buying and building, it's build when you can build above minimum viable product. When you can get above something that's just barely good enough, build it yourself. If you want to provide a great solution and you need it in time, look at the time and money, make your own adjustments, and that's when you buy. But you can also get a heck of a great education from buying, and that's part of the journey as well. So I would just emphasize that.
Yep, that sort of business technical combo skill set that we've been sort of talking about. Tim, what about for you? Where do you see this question going in the next few years? Are we still? I mean, I said at the beginning, Nathan, is this a good idea? But what do you think, Tim? Is asking the MSS of the future still a good idea?
Yeah, I think well, I'm a little biased here because we built a platform that allows people to build in. So, and I see Nathan nodding because there he knows where I'm going with this. Different providers are at different levels of maturity. There are a lot of tools out there, and building your process around these tools is one of the big challenges, right? So it's easy to tool yourself out of business. You can go buy every sales pitch you see, and cover all the security things that you think you're covering just by buying a bunch of things, and then it goes down like who's going to implement these things, who's going to make sure they're working properly and configured properly. It's very important to be deliberate about what you're purchasing and why. First figure out where your gaps are, and then look for something that fills those specific gaps. Using something like CIS or NIST, to help you figure out where you are and where your exposures are. But then again, yeah, it comes to how do I integrate this into my existing set of tools? And it may be that you decide not to buy a certain tool because it doesn't integrate with the other tools in your stack, even if it's a great tool. There may be something else that integrates better or provides you an API to allow you to integrate that with your tools and get that thing deployed and configured for your clients.
I like it. Yeah, just because you take a vitamin doesn't mean it agrees with all the other ones that you've taken.
Right.
Someone used that analogy as well. Great. I really appreciate you coming on. Nathan, we will see you a bit later. But Nathan, Teddy, Ben, and Tim, and also Chella, who had to drop, thanks for being such great panelists. I hope you've had a bit of a different conversation than usual. I don't know. We try to push the needle. Let's give you a big virtual round of applause. And I look forward to seeing you in the audience.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much. Fantastic.